Iran continues to resist international pressure opposing its nuclear program. Showing a photo up, check this out, on Iranian television today. President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad claims to have made major advances in Iran's nuclear program. Ahmadinejad inspected rods Iran says they use domestically. They made fuel for the very first time. You can see it here. What exactly does this development mean? How big a threat is Iran's nuclear program? How should the international community be reacting? Joining me now, the author of the new book, A Single Roll of the Dice, Obama's Diplomacy with Iran, Trita Parsi is with me, and in Washington, the president of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, Clifford May, is here. Gentlemen, good to see you both. Look, a lot of the rhetoric is starting to heat up again around Iran, specifically now in the wake of these bombings on the Israeli embassies. Give me a sense of where you, Trita Parsi, you think this is going on both sides.
Well, the rhetoric is extremely high on all ends, and I think it's quite unhelpful. What the Iranians are saying and the language that they're using, for instance, against Israel is further increasing the temperature. What the response has been, of course, is also not helping. And it's leading to a little bit of a situation of hysteria. And it's dangerous because the hysteria tends to decrease our options and increasingly push us towards only military-oriented options. And mindful of how disastrous the war in Iraq has been, as well as other military actions in the region, I don't think there's an appetite amongst the American public. And in fact, I don't think there's an appetite in the Obama administration. I think the Obama administration would like to increase its decision-making space. But the rhetoric from all sides right now, unfortunately, is doing the opposite. Cliff
May, how would you characterize this, post-embassy attack? Again, the Israelis say the Iranians were behind this. How do you characterize what's going on now?
Well, I think it once again shows the danger that is posed by the regime that has been ruling Iran since 1979, and in particular, of course, by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which are sort of, I don't think I'm using too strong a term, the stormtroopers of the regime, and the Quds Force, which is also helping Assad slaughter Syrians at this moment. You've had the Iranians attempt a bombing and an assassination here in Washington, D.C. You've had them now reaching out in other places. This regime has been killing Americans really for more than 30 years, and it's a dangerous regime, and it gets more dangerous every day, particularly as it continues its march towards developing nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them. So we are in a very dangerous situation that's going to play out over the next year or so.
All right, but how does this play out? Let's put one card on the table, Israel. Israel says that there may be a window that is closing because their concern is that Iran is developing a nuclear facility and they may put it underground, making it immune to attack. Does that in some way, Trita Parsi, again, elevate the possibility that Israel alone or in conjunction with other countries may have some kind of attack on Iran as they've done in the past? We think about Iraq, of course, and Syria.
Yes, Syria, yeah. We have to remember that, we've been hearing warnings from Israel that they're just about to take military actions because the Iranians are just about to hit some sort of a irreversible point of no return technical accomplishment. But everything up to now seems to have been a bluff because the Israelis haven't done anything. That doesn't mean, of course, that it would be a bluff every time. And I think the Obama administration is very concerned. The U.S. military in particular are very concerned that the Israelis would do something because the American assessment of what the Israelis could achieve is quite limited. And even the Israelis don't have an assessment that is particularly generous. At best, it would be able to set back the program 2 or 3 years, after which the Iranians would probably redouble their efforts to get a nuclear weapon. So I think it's a very dangerous situation. I think we should not underestimate the tensions that actually currently exist between the Obama administration and the government of Netanyahu. They tend to view things quite differently, and particularly when you listen to the American military, it becomes quite stark that there's some major differences there.
Cliff May, what's your view on that?
Yeah, look, it's not that the Israelis are bluffing, it's that the Israelis understand the threat they face. And the threat not just to Israel, although this regime has for years been inciting and threatening genocide against Israel while also denying the Holocaust. This is also a regime that writes death to America on its missiles, and Ahmadinejad has promised that a world without America is possible. And after Obama reached out to Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader, Khamenei came back and said, America is still the great Satan, and preachers in Iran said he's a black Satan as well. This is a dangerous regime, but Trita is right on one thing. The hardware is not the problem. It is this regime that is the problem. This regime, which fancies itself as being oil wealthy and nuclear armed and a new colossus, bestriding the Middle East, holding Syria, holding Lebanon, supplying Hamas, supplying Hezbollah, of course, and by the way, collaborating as it has for years, we do know, with al-Qaeda as well. This regime is the problem. Now, I guarantee you that Netanyahu and other Israelis every day are thinking of what they can do to prevent this regime from achieving its ambitions against America, against Israel, against the Middle East, and against the world. But it's a very difficult situation. There are no good answers, there are bad answers, and there are worse answers.
Let's talk about from the Iranian perspective. They've got elections in 2 weeks. All right. As a U.S. Diplomat told me last week, they said, think about it from their perspective. If you're an advisor to Ahmadinejad and you look at the story, what happened in Iraq, and you look at the story out of Afghanistan, and then you compare it to North Korea, for example, or Pakistan, you say, gee, if you have a nuclear weapon, everything's very different. Isn't it in their interest, if they feel threatened, to use whatever means they can to get a nuclear weapon? Is that the assumption you've got to go by if you are in the U.S., the Israeli, the Canadian government, that it makes sense for this regime to try to get a nuclear weapon or not? What would you say to that, Trita Parsi?
Oh, well, I would say that we have adopted an assumption in which we assume that the Iranians are looking for a nuclear weapon no matter what. And I think it is a faulty assumption because I think their calculations are far more complicated, and I don't think actually Ahmadinejad is particularly central to those calculations. What we're missing is that as we have also on our end adopted an approach that is very centered on pressure and sanctions, we may have also increased their desire for a nuclear deterrence. Cliff mentioned a lot of characteristics of the regime and a lot of the problems that it constitutes, but that's a repeat of the problem. What is the solution? And so far, having a very heightened rhetoric, having a hysterical debate about this.
Well, what's the other side then if the regime keeps Ahmadinejad, if he's a puppet of the Supreme Council or the Supreme Leader? What's the option if policies of engagement so far haven't worked?
Well, the policies of engagement have been somewhat limited, first of all. I think they've only been tried on a couple of occasions. The title of my book is A Single Roll of the Dice. It's actually a quote from an Obama administration official who said that our policy ended up becoming a gamble on a single roll of the dice. They had to work right away or not at all. Bottom line is, diplomacy is going to be tremendously difficult, and it's going to take a lot of time, and it's not going to be fixed in 3 or so weeks. But the alternative to that increasingly looks at what we're seeing right now. You're seeing increased terrorism, you're seeing assassinations taking place in Iran, and you're seeing a rhetoric on all sides that is increasingly becoming militaristic and increases the risk of yet another disastrous war in the region.
All right, Cliff, last word to you, but are those the only options? Is it a military option, or is it diplomacy, or are there tougher sanctions, or already sanctions that may work? What's your view?
Look, first, I would love to see regime change from within. In 2009, there was that possibility when people rose up in the streets. They asked in shouts, Obama, are you with us or against us? He didn't respond because he was trying to reach out to Khamenei. He was trying to reach out to Ahmadinejad. I think that was a mistake. I think that's been proven. I think anything we can do to support the people who would like to rise up before what's likely to be another fraudulent election would help. If the Iranian people can deal with this themselves, that would be the best thing, no question about it, and I don't think it is impossible, but we have to support the Iranian people against this repressive government, and sanctions are actually part of that. Obama should make that clear to the Iranian people, that he is imposing very strict sanctions increasingly, and it can get more so, but he is doing that to help them rid themselves of an oppressive regime that threatens the region and the world.
All right, I got to leave it there. Trita Parsi, author of A Single Roll of the Dice, Obama's Diplomacy with Iran, and Clifford May from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. We'll be back talking about this a lot more, gentlemen. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.